today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
You think you're fighting about money, but the truth is you can't even agree on what money is. Stay tuned as I explain this in this coming episode. The good news is we can change our maps if we want to. The bad news is most of us don't even know that we have one. So when we get into a fight with our partner about money, we might be fighting about one thing and they might be fighting about something completely different. Hi, welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship, and I am your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about how money is not what you think it is. And it's going to be a deep dive into the idea of money maps, right? Sounds like a treasure map, but it's not. What it really is a concept created by Dr. John Gottman to describe our internal representation of what money is. And Dr. Gottman has found in his research that we all have a different representation of what money is. Now, internal representations come alive for us based on all the inputs we've had as children and adults. The inputs that we had from our moms, the inputs that we had from our dads, the inputs that we had in school, the inputs that we had at our first job, the inputs that we had in our neighborhood. If you were a rich kid in a poor neighborhood, you had one concept of money. If you were a poor kid in a rich school, you had another. Or if you were like me and happened to be both, it was really confusing. You had all kinds of different ideas about money. And our concept of money, our internal representation of money shows up in different kinds of class thinking. I mean, you've heard people talk about a blue collar mindset or an entrepreneurial mindset or a white collar mindset. These are all different ways that people think about money and how it can be used. And it's heavily influenced initially by the way we grow up. And our internal map is going to be a conglomerate of all these things. Now, here's the good news. The good news is we can change our maps if we want to. The bad news is most of us don't even know that we have one. So when we get into a fight with our partner about money, we might be fighting about one thing and they might be fighting about something completely different. Yeah. So what do I mean by that? I mean that let's take the rich kid in the poor neighborhood is going to have an attitude of, got to keep it to me, so everyone's trying to take it from me. And the poor kid in the rich school might have envy around money, might feel like they need to spend it more freely to make up for not having it. I'm like just making this stuff up. And then you put those two people together, and they get into a fight about money, they're coming at it from completely different planets, right? Because they've got different money maps. I'm going to give you a case study. A case study is a story, all right? A story. And here's the story. A couple that I was working with, one grew up in the South Bronx and the other grew up in the Upper East Side. And the one from the Upper East Side grew up in a wealthy family, all the right names and schools, and their attitude about money was that there's lots of it available. They were very laissez-faire about it. They had the capacity to earn money quickly. The other partner who grew up in the South Bronx had a very, I need to earn money in a way where it cannot be taken away from me point of view. And the one that grew up in the South Bronx ended up getting a job as a civil servant, because it's very hard to lose your job as a civil servant, and had money put away for retirement and medical, while the child from the Upper East Side was more entrepreneurial, had their own business, very generative. So here you have one who has this attitude of, well, you know, I need to make sure that my income is locked down, assured, because anyone could take it from me at any time. This child fought people off about money in the neighborhood they grew up in, while the Upper East Side partner had this attitude of, you know, I can spend money and invest it where I need to. Now, you would think that this would be a great partnership, but they actually clashed in a lot of ways. The Upper East Side product, for example, was actually really frugal about money when it came to their home, for example. The lessons that individual had learned as a child is that if you want to gain money, grow money, become a successful entrepreneur, you invest money in businesses or in scenarios that have a low risk and high yield, and you keep your expenses down. And when you buy shoes that last a long time or that you can resole, et cetera, et cetera. While the partner who grew up in the South Bronx had a very different attitude about money. And that is, if you got it, you got to spend it. All right. I've got my medical put away. I got my 401k. So I'm going to spend what I got now. And so there were constant fights about money in this household. The one from the South Bronx always spending more than had been agreed on. The one from the Upper East Side paying for it reluctantly, but all the while feeling like, why is this going on? What is wrong with this person? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they just didn't get each other. And when they had fights about money, they thought they were fighting about the same thing. Oh, she just spends money like it's going out of style. Oh, he's so cheap. That's the kind of fight that they would have. Once we identified why they had the attitudes that they had about money, everything began to change. And that's the value and importance of your money map, of understanding how you grew up thinking about money, how you think about, why you think about money the way you do today. Who did you learn it from? By the way, is what you learned valid, right? I'm sure that there was validity in both points of view here from the person who grew up with East Side wealth and the person who grew up with the South Bronx scrappiness. Until they came to work with us, the kind of fights they had were freaking brutal. There was a lot of name calling, a lot of yelling and screaming, a lot of stonewalling, a lot of hurt feelings. And it was terrible for who? The children, right? And so the children are growing up in the middle of this fracas, and their attitude about money is it's got to be something bad because mommy and daddy are always fighting about it. So they've got a completely different kind of mind map as a result of what's going on in this household. Now, the good news is you can identify your mind map, your money map around money, your emotional background, the history that leads you to think the way it is, and your values and thoughts around money can be shifted and changes. But the bad news is it's very hard to do this on your own. The simplest way is to go through a process called mental and emotional release, which we use here at Rich in Relationship, and reassess how you want the lifestyle you want to have, the way that you want to use money, and reorder your values and let go of any old emotions and old beliefs that may be locked in there from growing up. And through tools like MER, you can completely reorder and shift your relationship with money, your money map, as Gottman calls it. Without doing this kind of work, it's almost impossible to come into real agreement with your partner. You may go to marriage counseling together, and if the counselor has no understanding of money maps or minimal understanding of money maps, the counselor is going to propose compromises. Oh, let's go back to our East Side South Bronx couple. Oh, East Side Joe, if you'd just be willing to spend a little more, then South Bronx Sally would agree to make sure that she spends a little less and you'll live happily ever after. Those kinds of agreements will work in the short term, but in the long term, the two money maps, they're actually like frames of reference, frames of looking at the world will always be clashing, right? Until the money maps are brought into harmony and brought into alignment, until the values are brought into alignment, that battle is going to come back. Inevitably, South Bronx Sally is going to step out of line, or East Side Joe is going to lose his temper, or whatever. It is inevitable, right? The reason why couples counseling is maybe 50% successful, if we're lucky, is that compromising at that stage in the game without a deep understanding of the values involved and why people are framing money the way that they are, only reduces the fight. It doesn't eliminate the cause. In real life, the first step to ending any conflict around money or anything else is to identify the fight, right? The fight, we talk about it here on Rich in Relationship all the time, is that I'm going to win, you're going to lose fight that means World War III anytime it comes up. It means that even when you win, you lose, because if your partner loses, you lose, right? In a partnership, if one partner loses, the other one loses too. If one partner thinks they're winning while the other one is losing, they're not, because the partnership itself is failing, and the partnership is a super high value for the partners. So the first step is to end that fight, right? Compromising on values will lower that fight for a while, but without identifying the actual dynamic of the fight, what are the triggers? What do you do when you're triggered? What are the first feelings that come up? Without identifying it first, you can't actually end it. You can just put it off for a little while. Here, let me give you a metaphor. A person's walking down a street and he falls into a huge hole. He's walking down the street, and for those of you who are watching the video, he's looking at his phone and he falls down into the hole. And he looks around and he says, "Oh my God, I've fallen down into a hole." And so he crawls out of the hole and dusts himself off and keeps going. The next day, he starts walking down the street and he's looking at his phone and he says, "Oh, wait a minute. This is familiar. Maybe I should put my phone down." He puts his phone down. "Oh my God, look, there's that hole again." And he tiptoes around it. The next day, he's walking down the street and he's not looking at his phone. And he goes, "Oh, look, I'm on Fall in the Hole Street. I better go to the other side of the street so I don't fall in that hole." And the next day, he comes walking down towards Fall in the Hole Street and he says, "You know what? There's a better way than Fall in the Hole Street. I won't have this problem at all if I go the better way." The first step in ending the fight is identifying that there's a freaking hole that you've been falling into again and again and again that is a lose-lose for both of you, even if it feels like a win in the short run. Going to the other side of the street, that is basically the equivalent of identifying your triggers and working around them. So, oh, I feel triggered. I'm going to do some deep breathing. I'm going to do some meditation. All right, let's talk about this now that I feel calm. But going to a completely different street, that is the value of letting go of old emotions and letting go of old beliefs. That is the value of changing your money map completely and understanding your partner's money map and having them change their money map completely. It's more than just developing empathy and compassion. You can have empathy and compassion for the other person all day, but if you have different maps around money, there's going to be conflict, and it's going to be hard to resolve with satisfaction if you're just living in empathy and compassion. You won't really, truly build a joint financial vision. Well, I'll take it back. You could build a joint financial vision honoring both maps. That is fully possible. It is fully possible that you could create a spending plan for South Bronx Sally and a spending plan for East Side Joe, and keep their spending separate. There are ways you could structure your finances so that both could happen. Both money maps can be honored. Both experiences can happen simultaneously. It's not going to be as satisfying as having a truly joint financial vision. All right, but it is possible to resolve the conflict itself by separating out your finances sufficiently and still making sure that you're all contributing where you think you should be contributing. But it is far more satisfying when both people do the heavy lifting, let go of the old emotions, let go of the limiting beliefs, and truly get on the same page. So here's a more detailed case study. Lisa and Mark are a married couple who constantly argue about money. Lisa grew up in a household where money was scarce, and her parents frequently fought about finances. She learned early on that money was a source of stress and fear. For her, actually, money saving is crucial. Mark, on the other hand, grew up in a wealthy family. I guess he's the equivalent of East Side Joe. It's abundant, and it's rarely discussed openly. Spending money on luxury items is enjoyable for him. When Mark wants to spend money on a luxury vacation, Lisa feels anxious and defensive, even if they have the money. And she's worried that it'll deplete their savings and leave them vulnerable. Mark feels frustrated that Lisa's fear is preventing them from enjoying life. So what seems like a simple disagreement over vacation plans is actually a deep-seated conflict between Lisa's money map and Mark's money map, right? And you may be listening to this, having this experience right now. This is really not an unusual one here. The truth is that we are attracted to people who are our opposites, right? If we grew up with one money map, we often pick someone on purpose with a different money map because there's something they have, a strength that they have around money that our family didn't. And they picked us because we have a strength around money that they didn't. And the joy is when you learn from each other's strengths and start operating in harmony. Our next episode is, we're going to stick with this money theme for a few more episodes because it's big. I know it's not as sexy as sex, but it's good. It's juicy. We're going to talk about, one episode coming up is going to be about money fights and sexual frustration, right? How the two work together. So that'll be a little sexier. And we're also going to talk about how the male money map tends to be different than the female money map. So this is kind of a twist on the money map concept. Today, we gave you the broad concept of money maps. Next episode, we're going to talk about when a mind that evolves in testosterone thinks about money, there's a way that it goes at it. And when a mind that evolves in estrogen thinks about money, there's a way that it goes at it. And by the way, there are women who have higher levels of testosterone, and there are men who have higher levels of estrogen. So it isn't necessarily about what you got in your pants. It might actually have a lot to do with the kinds of connections that you have in your brain and how this impacts the way you look at money. So stay tuned for the next episode of Rich in Relationship when we go deeper into money maps and masculine and feminine money maps.